Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, November 27th, 2025, and today we are going to be taking a look at a 2028 presidential election prediction between President Donald Trump, the incumbent president, and Senator Turkey from the state of Mississippi. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day, hopefully surrounded by friends and family. Today is a great day. I just finished Thanksgiving dinner. I was contemplating whether or not I was going to make a video today, but I figured it'd be quite timely to talk about Senator Turkey hailing from the state of Mississippi, especially relevant on a day like today, and what a future presidential election prediction might look like, given that this election is going to take place in roughly 3 years' time. Now, before I see a comment talking about Donald Trump being the Republican nominee for a fourth time on the presidential level, running for a third term, and how this is unconstitutional, well, so is a turkey being president of the United States, but you don't see me complaining. So looking at the presidential electoral map, we're working with the same exact states that we normally would expect. But looking at the cycle here, we honestly expect it to be quite a competitive race between the two. Now, in today's video, we're going to be unpacking a lot. We're going to be taking a look at states that have the highest wild turkey populations. Mississippi, very obviously the home state of Senator Turkey, coming from that state. It is the state with the highest just by raw number, and you'll see all across the country, a big reason as to why you will see some of that home base and regional advantage really locks in for the Turkey Party on this side, whereas the president might be performing a little bit better in areas with higher hunter populations. You can see that across the country, there are states with significantly higher percentages of the voting electorate that are license holders, people who are actually, declared hunters in their state. And so looking at the electoral map here, what we know is that just based off what we have seen in years past, home state advantage matters a lot. Donald Trump, of course, starts out with that advantage in Florida with 30 electoral votes, and Senator Turkey rings in at about 6 nationwide. Now, that still leaves a very wide open electoral map. I don't think that, it should be seen as traditional. We saw that recently the Democratic Party endorsed the Turkey Party to be their nominee for 3 years' time from now. And so it'll be sort of this weird dynamic coalition of some of those disaffected former Democrats who may not even be excited to vote in an election between a Turkey and Trump, right? And you think about why that might make a difference on turnout. We could be in either for a tremendously high turnout election or a tremendously low one. But what we know is that at baseline, there are going to be safe states, as we do in all of our predictions constantly. A lot of the states, too, that you will find Senator Turkey really perform well in are some of those Democratic states that, in the last presidential election, for instance, when you're looking, at the 2024 cycle, a lot of these states that were overwhelmingly Democratic states like California and Hawaii, are also states that have the highest percentage of vegan population across the country. I know it doesn't seem like it's all that necessary to talk about, especially since a turkey is on the ballot here, but it matters because the most vegan-obsessed states oftentimes will see this voting opportunity as a means of saving an innocent animal. Now, hardly innocent if you're a senator in Washington, D.C., but looking at states like Oregon and New York and California, where you have, high vegan populations in Hawaii, where it seems to be this vegan safe haven. Those are the states that are really going to ring in as some of the strongest here across the country. Oregon, California, Hawaii, and I think I'm blanking on the last one I just said, the state of New York, probably come in as safe states for Senator Turkey. Now, on the flip side, Donald Trump is going to do quite well in many of these areas, too. You're going to see that, obviously Florida is going to come in here, too. And you saw that, the president has really been weaponizing this branding around barbecue over ballots for the campaign down in Texas. But also what is quite notable is that you're probably going to see Trump do well, especially given the high percentage of, residents here. 1 million are paid hunting license holders, right? 1 million people, the most out of any state in the country. That makes a big difference electorally, and I think it's going to be a big driving factor as to why Texas would vote red again in 2028, this time probably by a bigger margin than they did in the last election. Now, Senator Turkey is going to benefit from some other states too, where you're going to say in Massachusetts, it seemed like it was more and more of a toss-up between the two candidates, Turkey or Trump. But at the end of the day, Massachusetts will never vote for Donald Trump. I'm sure anyone, the residents in that state could tell you that. So that one's safe on the Turkey side. When it comes down to Trump having some other safe states too, you have to think, right? You look at states in the Deep South where, there's going to be times it's going to be directly conflicted. Some of the more swing state ones I think about, right? Mississippi's safe, but in Alabama, you don't have that many wild turkeys. In Georgia, you don't have that many wild turkeys. Those are states that reasonably would probably go to the president, given that, again, not every person in the state of Alabama is going to say, I know a turkey personally. In the same way they might in the state of Mississippi, right, looking at this electoral map and how things are so personal to voters that oftentimes is the driving factor as to why people are able to vote a certain way because of a personal connection to X, Y, and Z. In this case, it works to the benefit of the Republicans in Georgia and the state of Alabama. Now, taking a look at some of these other states, too, where you find, wild turkey populations exceptionally large in states like Montana. I mean, 120,000, turkeys in the state. There's probably not 120,000 people in Montana, right? And you think about why that matters. It means that the turkey population is in many cases going to be equally as powerful as the human voting population. And that means this state is probably going to be quite solid because you already have a lot of sympathetic, human voters voting for turkey candidates, especially the senator. And so Montana, I think, rings in up there. And looking at a lot of these other states that have high populations, states like Iowa, states like Arkansas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma, it's not really all that shocking when you see these states, and you can expect them to be pretty, favorable to the turkey party in this election. Now, it doesn't mean everything. Hunting licenses, again, are a great a way of indicating and helping us understand exactly of how many of these states are going to go, which direction they would be inclined to vote in. And when you look at some of these states with exceptionally high populations of their state registered to be hunters, well, of course, they'll have a natural aversion to voting for, candidates like the senator. You're going to find that those are states like Idaho that will ring in as safe for Trump. States like South Dakota, again, these are real problems for the turkey party candidate here. Wyoming, North Dakota, and even some of these other states that, may not have voted for Trump before. You also have states like Maine, where all of the districts have high portions of their voting population that are considered to be self-identified and also registered, licensed hunters in these states. Now, the turkey is also going to do quite well, given that when you look at some of these other states too, it's harder to understand exactly where many of the states. I think this is pretty much where we're at in terms of, total states that we can declare to be safe. But huge regions of the country are left up for grabs. The Sun Belt's torn. Texas is red. California is turkey colored. When you look at the rest of that Sun Belt, right? Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, up in the air. You look at the Midwest, up in the air. You look at some areas of the, not deep South, but members of states below the Mason-Dixon line. You're going to see that these states are still up in the air. In the New England region, as much as it is, largely comprised of Senator Turkey, doing well in Massachusetts and New York. The rest of the states, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, are seemingly up for grabs, given that Maine is voting for Donald Trump. And so in these 290 electoral votes, we're really reaching an era where, a lot of the remaining states are going to make or break the candidacies for both of these two candidates, right? You look at 112 for Trump, 136 for Turkey. You're not working with a lopsided margin too heavily in favor of really anyone, right? A sweep in the Rust Belt could really change the map dramatically, but it wouldn't guarantee anyone a victory. This is going to be undeniably a very, very close race. Now, we know that Donald Trump's approval rating is not high on the national stage, but Senator Turkey's favorability rating isn't all that great either. Voters are largely, upset. And think about, what comes to mind when people think about turkeys and Thanksgiving. It's not always positive. And it certainly doesn't always mean that they want a turkey in the Oval Office. Up until this year, with the Democratic Party's dissolution and endorsement of the turkey candidate, you have found that, historically, it has been turkeys who have been pardoned on Thanksgiving. They have been seen as, in a way, the president bestows on them a pardon status. And so Senator Turkey was pardoned by President Ronald Reagan way back when. He's probably still young in presidential standard for candidates for office, but is at 136 electoral votes. This will be quite interesting because it will honestly be quite full circle. Maybe Thanksgiving next, 2029, Senator Turkey can pardon some humans on Election Day. We'll see if that pans out. I don't know if that's in, Project 2029. But looking at where we're at on the national stage, 290 electoral votes that have yet to be declared. Now, I want to start off by saying that I think that what we've seen has been really a regional advantage. But in terms of culture in the heart of America, this is where Trump is really going to start to do better. Because even though these states don't seem as lopsided in favor of the president, it is very possible that, he is winning over many of these voters simply on the fact that he sees them as the prime target to say, let's have me in office because you want to eat the turkeys, right? So that's really the big conversation point being had at the dinner table, probably over turkey, which is that, would you rather be governed by one or eating one? And it's a big disconnect, obviously. I would say the term is inhumane, but I guess it's not, right? It is, or in a way it is, but looking at where we're at, that is the appeal that Trump has been made. Barbecue over ballots. It's been this constant struggle, and it's one that I think many Turkey Party voters are upset about what they're hearing, which is why in a lot of these states where you have massive vegan populations, the vibes are at least vegan in many of them too. That's why Washington, I'm going to move over into being that state that's going to be likely the Turkey Party. That's what's going to be interesting and what is going to be, a driving factor as to why some of these states are going to weigh the vote the way that they did. Now, looking at the Midwest, though, the Turkey Party has done remarkably well here in the past. When you look at their special elections that they've been running in, when you look at, what the polling data looks like between them, it's not all that surprising that these states are voting this way. And also proximity to Canada, that there's a lot of wild turkeys in Canada, and sometimes they, are swimming across the lakes here by Michigan, over to Wisconsin. They're taking the Amtrak down to Pennsylvania. And that is going to be, again, all about this personal connection point. Do you know a turkey actively, right? That's what's going to be the driving home factor for the senator here to win over voters, is that personal and very real connection that voters have with fellow turkeys across the United States. But obviously, as we've still filled out this map here, it's still a toss-up. 158 electoral votes remain to be categorized, and the senator is at 196 and 192, and the president is at 188. Now, the thing about Alaska that I think we don't talk about much is that there's no wild turkeys. That's going to be a state that is going to be tough, but I do also think simultaneously the president's popularity is just not super great in that state. I think it makes more sense for it to be likely. In other circumstances, it probably would be safe, but Donald Trump really is a drag, especially given some of the comments he's been making about the senator and his running mate, former vice president, the former vice president in this race from 2006, Vice President Ham, who, if you remember, floated a possibility of running for office in 2021. We made a video putting together, actually, the Senator Turkey against Vice President Ham back in 2021. But, looking at where we're at right now, Alaska still is a little bit apprehensive to being solid for Trump. But it's certainly not going to go to the Turkey Party, at least not right now, especially given that the population of wild turkeys is, 0, right? So none in that state. 155 electoral votes. Again, a lot of what we're going to see is probably regional voting. And I think where you see that the senator is going to do quite well, when you look at this wild turkey population, as much as it may not be solid, it's enough to at least sway many of these voters. Now, the Turkey Party is able to win over a lot of voters, especially on issues, close to the hearts of voters in Colorado and New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. And I think that is where, again, not just the personal touch that matters, but I also think, too, these are states that care a lot about the same things that Turkey Party candidates do, too. And I'm not talking about things that, what should be on your kitchen table. I'm talking about the rising costs of turkey nationwide, because when you look at why that matters to voters in these states in particular, you're going to see it matters the same for, turkey voters on the national stage. They see it as one and the same. And these states, like I said, a lot of it's going to come down to regional voting. The Sun Belt is a region where wild turkey populations are higher than in most parts of the country. That's because you have warmer temperatures. That's because you have better climates and better circumstances for wild turkeys to be around. And again, that personal connection is going to be a driving in factor. And I think you see a lot eye to eye, or maybe not eye to eye, but if you're looking down eye to eye between the turkey voters and the human voters in these states. So about 230 electoral votes here for Senator Turkey. President Trump is at 191, 117 electoral votes remain to be seen here. South Carolina has always been quite interesting to me. I think that this state itself is going to vote overwhelmingly for Trump. I think that it's going to be not super solid that we're locking it in, but I think that the senator, we saw a lot of inability to win over voters in this state. We saw that the senator held a campaign rally in Myrtle Beach and nobody attended. And so all-time enthusiasm probably for Senator Turkey and the Turkey Party is very low in this state. But right now, Donald Trump still stands out ahead. Now, Minnesota, Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, Ohio, Delaware, Maryland, shout out Maryland, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, and New Hampshire are all states that, have yet to be characterized too. It's going to be a nail biter, right? These races are always close. Well, whenever Donald Trump is on the ballot, it's always going to be a close race, but more so this time because the polls don't tell us who's going to win. It says it's a complete toss-up, right? It says on one end that Turkey could have a landslide, that Trump could have another. It really doesn't matter. But as it stands currently, Donald Trump very obviously cannot go toe-to-toe with Senator Turkey, and that makes a difference. That really does make a difference in some of these states because on the debate stage, we saw that President Trump did not attend. Put out on Truth Social that he did not think that he should be sharing a debate stage with a turkey, but a lot of voters didn't take that well, right? And a lot of voters did not like that about it and said, you know what? I don't know if I'm on board. I will say this, though. Despite having a small hunting population, the president seems to really be resonating in Maryland and Virginia, two states that you might be shocked to see voting for the president, but similar to many of these other states, there is no appetite, LOL, there is no appetite to have a turkey in the Oval Office. Whereas in states like West Virginia and states like Ohio, they love the turkey. They love the idea of the turkey. They think that the turkey is great. Especially in West Virginia, you're going to find here that a lot of the voters that have previously backed Republicans were really saying, you know what, I'm changing my mind on this. I think the president has not aligned with me on a variety of different issues, and I'm ready for change. And if that change means putting in a turkey into the Oval Office, they're all on board. So Senator Turkey, from the state of Mississippi, wins Ohio, wins West Virginia, the first Democrat to do so in Ohio since Barack Obama, but the first Democrat to win West Virginia since Bill Clinton, 251 electoral votes remaining, about 64 that have yet to be characterized. Just to be a little bit annoying in terms of the coloring of the map here, we're going to say Senator Turkey narrowly wins the state of North Carolina. We're going to put that one in the lean column, or I guess the tilt column, for Senator Turkey, just so the entire, South is not moving in one direction in one big monolith. I'm going to break it up just for a moment here. But North Carolina narrowly goes to Senator Turkey, but Trump probably does win Minnesota barely too. And I think that, when you look at population of the most amount of residents that are licensed holders, Minnesota rings in at about 13%. Now, the Rust Belt is particularly difficult, I think, for Trump to do well, and just because he's exceptionally unpopular, but in Minnesota in particular, it'll probably be a little bit higher, and President Trump's probably going to ring in and win those states. The final states to look at is the New England region. And to be quite blunt with you about where we're at, I think Trump, being in the White House right now probably means he wins the District of Columbia. The remainder of these states will probably go to Senator Turkey by a pretty substantive amount. And I think that, it's no secret that the president is unpopular. Running for a third term was never going to be a great place for him to be. But also, too, I don't think that it means he's definitely doomed in every single one of these states. Obviously, he's still winning a lot of the swing states. Trump is up in Missouri, Kentucky, famous swing states. We cover them every cycle. Landslide victory in a swing state like Idaho and Wyoming. The Turkey Party obviously winning over their fair share of swing states, states like Utah and Louisiana that also, again, ring in as constant swing states. So it's been a very interesting campaign cycle. I think that this one will be a race to watch in 3 years' time. But as it stands right now, the data tells us one very consistent and clear thing, that Senator Turkey will probably be the next president of the United States and defeat Donald Trump in his bid for a third term on the national stage by a margin of 302 electoral votes to Trump's 236. Now, if you agree or disagree, I want to know in the comment section down below. Obviously, this is something that is the first of its kind where we've had a turkey as an opposition candidate on the national stage. But it is worth exploring and it is worth talking about. And I do want to know, what do you disagree with? What do you agree with? Do you think this prediction's all right? Do you think it's going to be wrong? We'll have to wait and see because obviously only time will tell as we get closer to this cycle. But as it stands right now, 302 electoral votes for Senator Turkey, 236 for Donald Trump. Certainly a fascinating presidential election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. And happy Thanksgiving. I hope this video goes out immediately because I need to get it out so you have time to watch it after you've hopefully had dinner with friends and family. Again, hope you are all doing very well. I'm very thankful for each and every one of you. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.